Can you hear it? Welcome to Relay.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Relay Station. You've got myself here. I'm Erris. Hi. And over there, I've got to get used to this. I've mirrored the cameras and it's been confusing me. Over there, we have CommanderLlama.
Hello.
How you doing, CommanderLlama?
I'm pretty good.
You
Although I'm tired.
You survived.
So I go to bed
CitizenCon?
early. I have had a cold since getting back from Texas. It was bad for like 5 days, and then now it's just been, Are you trying to determine what are you doing?
I'm trying to determine which light is causing the brightness there.
Oh, okay.
I'm just, playing around with. I can't. Whatever. Doesn't matter. I mean, I think Nakara had it worse. He was like completely out of it for a week and a half or two. So, but
No, I wasn't like destroyed, but I was, touched.
Yeah, touched by the con plague.
Touched by the con. Touched by Darjanator.
At least it wasn't Dolvac.
Dolvac touched everyone.
It's true. So we're gonna try this whole panel thing. We're gonna watch the Tony Z panel.
Okay.
We're gonna see what happens. Yeah, we're gonna see what happens. We're gonna see how this goes. Before we start, I posted it in chat just earlier. I'm gonna post it again. Probably after we're done. You should probably go and read the deep dive that CommanderLlama did. How was writing that?
Writing it was, well, it was painful in ways. It's because it started as a Cole's notes for the talk, and then, like I mentioned it in the Discord at one point, I think I was pages and pages into writing it, and it wasn't a Cole's note at like
I
5 pages ago. It wasn't a Cole's note. And I like paused the video because I'm watching the video as I write it and rewatching parts. And so I'm like, I don't know how far anymore, but 7 or 8 pages written. And I'm like 14 minutes into the 1 hour talk. And I'm just like, oh, sweet. No.
I think I remember exactly when that happened because I don't even know if I knew that you were doing the Cole's notes. And then I just got a Discord message from you, and you're like, I started Cole's notesing the Tony Z talk. I'm 10 minutes in. It's 7 pages long. And then, pound. So we're going to try and watch it. We're going to do what I did with Shiver in the past panels of we're both going to count down and hit play at the same time. And then we're going to pause at points, and we're going to talk about what Tony Z talked about and try and parse it.
We'll try.
So,
I'll try again.
Yeah. Try again. Okay. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. 3, 2, 1, play.
Persistent Universe Game Director Tony Zurovec.
I had to give some real thought about what it was that I wanted to discuss while I was out here. In the end, rather than going into a lot of intricate detail about
let me know how the audio ends up being, guys,
and running the risk that a lot of you guys here might not find that one topic very interesting, I decided to go broad and touch on a number of different things, while at the same time going deep enough that hopefully you guys will hear some things that you haven't yet heard before. Ultimately, the hope is that you'll come away with a more comprehensive understanding of what we view as the next tier of priorities for Star Citizen's persistent universe.
We were at this panel.
So, as many of you have previously heard,
I didn't
our
notice
long-term
this
objective
in any of the
is
shots.
for a fully systemic world.
You were too
And
unimportant.
what this means is that we want a dynamic, logical environment with a completely consistent set of rules that can intelligently
Actually, yeah, I
adapt
think Flint
to
gets like
whatever players
just
throw
a
at it
straight
to
on
ensure
close-up
that the
right at the
level
end,
of
right?
challenge is
Nice.
always going to be appropriate. This is really important for a number of reasons, and one of the biggest ones is that we want to give players total freedom.
Total
So
freedom.
this causes a lot of problems for a game designer,
Total
though,
freedom.
because it means that we can't really assume anything, and at times certain elements of the game can become extremely unbalanced. So, for example, every player might simultaneously decide that they want to live the life of a pirate and start attacking cargo freighters that are ferrying platinum, from a refinery to a production facility. So, if everything were to remain static, if the
thought it
game
was a
couldn't
fine shot,
appropriately
Flint.
compensate, it
But
wouldn't feel like our
human
real
memory
world,
is flawed,
and it
so-
definitely wouldn't feel very fun. What you'd really expect instead would be a lot of changes as players started to go that route. Those cargo freighters should demand higher fees to travel into such a dangerous area. The price for an armed escort should go through the roof, which should, of course, entice a lot more players and NPCs into going out and actually serving as security. So miners should react to these elevated prices, of course, by trying to find and produce more platinum. And in the end, this is really just basic supply and demand economics. And the effects that it generates serve as counterweights to the pressure that the players exert. They're essentially attempts by the system to compensate for these imbalances that occasionally take hold.
Okay, let's
And
pause
so
here for a
this
second.
algorithmic content, of course,
Do we count
What time are you at?
255?
Okay, I'm at 251. So,
I couldn't set it.
yeah. One, Bryce Arena, you are right. Tony Z should have been on the main stage for a few hours. Oh, hey, Rudy.
Could just have Tony Z Hall.
Well, I think it should have just been Tony Z Con. Just
I mean, there could be a second stage for all the other stuff.
right, but the main stage, nothing. Nice ghost. Oh, damn it, Rudy. Yeah, Darj, you're right. Ivo and Tony need their own things. So,
Who's Ivo?
Ivo Herzog,
Okay.
face deformation guy.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So Tony Z's talking supply and demand here, and the idea that even if every single player at some point is like, no, we're all going to be pirates right now. All
So
players.
what will happen?
Yes, what is going to happen? So all players band together at the launch and they're like, we're going to screw things up. We're all going to be pirates, all million of us. The game has to be able to compensate for that.
Yeah. And I mean, it sounds like the main compensation is just having players be a small fraction of the verse.
Right.
So on paper, at least, they're going for that 9-to-1 ratio. So even if all the players decide to be pirates, which is unlikely, but let's just say all of them do.
Every single one.
That's just 10% of the verse becoming pirates. And hopefully the other 90% is a huge buffer that can, soak those kind of decisions. So that's the first thing.
Now, I feel like throughout this entire talk, we're going to keep coming back to the 9-to-1 ratio, which is something that we still haven't really seen, and we don't know if they're going to pull it off. But from just in general, did you think like it sounded like what they're talking about all throughout this is feasible before we continue?
I didn't hear anything that sounded infeasible.
Okay.
Because the 9-to-1 thing, I assume, is probably just the real NPCs. Or, I mean, is it all of it? He did reference like tens of millions of simulated NPCs, but those are like the very simple NPCs where it's not necessarily that hard to create millions of them.
Yeah. I mean, they had said a long time ago that like every single thing in the game will create a job. So if a window in a station gets broken, that broken window has a cost to repair it and creates a job for an NPC to go and repair that window.
I don't know how far they'll take window things. But hopefully, you know, stuff like spaceships ends up being 10-to-1.
I hope so. Okay, ready to continue? In
Yeah,
3,
sure.
2, 1, action.
Course can sometimes feel a bit formulaic if you take it too far, when that's all there is to a game. And that's why we're layering on a lot of custom handcrafted content onto that systemic backdrop. Unique characters, specific challenges, and a lot of very intricately detailed areas that artists are spending many, many months, crafting. So setting up an algorithmic system like this means that we need to be able to objectively evaluate an item's value. And this has been a real problem for us in the past because the original ship and item prices were pretty arbitrary. They were really just best guesses that were made at the time. Starting with 3.3, however, we've moved to a model that allows us to much more precisely define what's required to produce an item, including everything from the type and quantity of materials, the amount of labor that's going to be involved, the production technology, the factory capacity, the amount of time that will be required. And these pricing changes are going to ripple through the entire production pipeline. And this is crucially important to us because the price of one item, basically this is a really important step forward because it gives us clarity with regards to how dozens of other variables within the system need to react, and thus it enables some of the much more complicated equations that we need to enact to accomplish this, to be realized.
Well,
Here we have a chart
pretty simple point, but
that
did
I
you
had
want
Jake
to
Mealy,
stop
one of our Austin designers, create.
Okay. All right. Well, basically everything has a UEC value.
Everything.
Everything. I have to wonder if you're just like selecting random subcomponents in their lumberyard editor, if you'll be able to spot like UEC base values and stuff like that.
I really hope so. I hope they get that detailed. And they showed it. Do they show it off later in this panel, or was it in a different one?
Which one? What show? What?
No, it was in a different panel. I think the like being able to adjust stuff on the fly. That's the ship, like the flight model. But I figure they'll be able to adjust like ship costs, the value of each of these components of a ship pretty easily.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, they'd probably change, they could probably just tinker with the base values of like the starting commodities.
Yeah.
And those would all just ripple through all the fancy equations they're doing to do a full component-based thing for entire 500,000 polygon spaceships.
I do want to point out on this, I find it kind of interesting that transport is included. So they are even including the cost it takes to get the various parts to wherever the ship is put together.
Yeah, like the costs for bringing all this stuff together.
Now, because we're looking at the price breakdown, we have to talk about it briefly. We got some of the let's call them alpha ship pricings were shown off. Actually, they just went live with a new patch, 3.3 T or something.
It's the first pass of component-based pricing.
Right.
So I guess it's the first pass of this pie chart we're looking at.
Yeah.
But for other stuff.
Now, Freelancer's not on there, but we do have a bunch of ships. Now, there's not really much we can tell about how appropriate the prices are because we don't know how long it takes to earn UEC.
No. Yeah, like you asked me this before the stream, and it was just like, I mean... Or what you said, 200,000 for an Aurora. That's not that much. And I'm like, I don't know. It's a meaningless amount because, like,
they picked a number and that's what we.
Well, I mean, like, it's hard to know what we'll be earning when there's going to be so many changes to the mission system. Which probably, I'm assuming the mission rewards right now are like hand placed, best guesswork type stuff. Just like the ship prices used to be, or just like other prices used to be. I'm just trying to... Well, Twitch doesn't really do new lines very well, but...
That's understandable.
There you go. I added commas, because...
Commas make numbers a lot easier to read. You can tell whether it's 200,000 or 2 million much more easily when there's a comma involved.
Yeah. Well, I had this discussion, I guess, over text with Rudy. I think the most important thing for me with ship prices is you can do basically every profession in the game, at least try it on an introductory ship. Easily, which to me is kind of the same thing as having all the character classes in an RPG available to select.
Yeah, you don't have to buy a bunch or like
you don't have to you don't choose fighter when you start playing this RPG, and then it's like, oh, level to 30 in fighter, and we'll let you play wizard.
Right.
Kind of a same concept for Star Citizen. I'm hoping they make it very easy to try everything out. Ship rentals are probably a good way to tackle that. If you just want to try a prospector, you might not have to shell out 1.6 million UEC. You could just rent it for a week or whatever.
And I mean, everyone will have an Aurora. So you can go out there and mine stuff by hand and pick it up and throw it in your Aurora and fly somewhere if you want to try mining that way.
I guess. If you want to be the worst miner.
The worst miner ever, yes. Now, one of the things about the universe and the economy simulation is the idea that we have this freelancer price breakdown in front of us. And one of the ideas is, let's say that, the hull is made up of metals, right?
Yeah.
Now, when an order comes in for a freelancer, that will increase the demand for the metals to make the freelancer's hull.
That's right.
So if everyone's ships blow up, then miners would be able to make a whole lot more, or salvagers coming back with metal would be able to make a lot more because there'd be more demand.
In theory, right? Yeah, I guess if lots of ships were blowing up, and manufacturers, again, it would probably be that kind of delayed onset ripple effect where everyone's dying. Well, there's some stock of already finished ships that would start getting depleted. And then the manufacturers would go, oh, we're running out of ships. And the logic for this might not actually be this complicated, but let's just assume. Let's dream. They'll be like, oh, we got to start making more freelancers. They're going down fast. So they'll start placing orders. That took some time. That caused, they need a lot more hulls, which needs a lot more alloys. So the alloys see something bump up, so they start bumping up their production.
Right.
But that took time, and that just increased demand for all the, processed alloys that are there, which puts a demand on the refineries, which finally puts a demand on the miners.
Right.
I guess we don't really know, like, how long those ripple effects would take in game. That's probably going to be something that, I don't know, game days, game weeks, game months.
I'd imagine that's the sort of stuff that Tony Z has to figure out, right?
Yeah, and it's probably something they need to, balance over time.
Anything else about the price breakdown there?
I do wonder about, like, what some of them mean, personally. Like, so if you say, like, linear acceleration, is that, like, the main thruster's value?
Yeah, I'm not sure about the acceleration ones, the rotational speed. I'm not sure really why crew is in there.
Or, like, why speed and acceleration are different? Is that, like, subcomponents of the maneuvering thrusters?
Boost versus... So, like, linear acceleration is boost. Linear speed is your main thrusters. Rotational acceleration... I don't know. The different thrusters, I guess.
Yeah.
Why is health there?
Health.
I mean, you've got your
Do they mean health like medical?
I don't know. It seems strange.
Yeah. I don't know.
But why? Like, it shouldn't be player health. Player health.
The amount of blood
that you have to give to buy a freelancer. Okay. Yeah. Maybe. Good to continue?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm at 427.
Same. 3, 2, 1, action.
Right in the last few days before this, and what it essentially illustrates is a price breakdown of the freelancer ship. And this is a work in progress, and the values will inevitably evolve, but it should give you a pretty good sense of how we're measuring and evaluating these things. So looking at this, you can see, for example, that the relative percentage of the freelancer's price that's caused by the shield generator in blue towards the bottom, that's not arbitrary. The size and strength of that shield generator were determined by the same equations that would be used to calculate shield generators used in other ships. And it's that consistency, that objectivity, that's really important to us. And what this means is that if something like the price of a commodity used in the production of that shield generator, or maybe what a unit of labor costs at the factory where they're produced, if that changes, we'll be able to precisely calculate what that means for the price of both shield generators, freelancers, and anything else that uses those elements within its production. And this is basically just another view of that same pricing model showing off a half dozen ships being compared. The proposed price you can see at the far left, and you'll start to see some of these rippling into the game here relatively soon.
Got an expensive hull.
This more objective way of looking at ships and items is also really beneficial when we're trying to ascertain what kind of capabilities we want to bestow upon a new item, because it allows us to easily visualize where there may be gaps in the offerings that would make a lot of sense to fill. And there are some additional benefits to this systemic approach. At the top of the list, I would say, is the fact that it's intuitive. You basically just tend to expect that if there's a shortage in something, that prices are going to rise, and that if there's a surplus, that prices are going to fall. You won't typically have enough information at your disposal to know exactly how a change in price in one thing or another will ripple through the economy.
Working away
but at a macro level, you should be able to intelligently infer quite a bit. And this actually leads to another major positive, which is that systemic systems tend to reward very clever gameplay.
Systemic systems.
Basically, behavioral changes tend to,
systemic.
without trying to go too deep into this, behavioral changes tend to often lag behind an economy, which in turn leads to boom and bust cycles. And this happens in the real world all the time.
Take a shot
if you think
for
about
probability.
copper, for instance, if worldwide demand for copper were to jump dramatically tomorrow, then mining companies would add an extra shift in order to be able to compensate. To allow them to ramp up production. And if demand were to still outstrip supply, then they might think about bringing on more workers, but that could take months before they actually get these guys hired up and trained.
And work more.
And if a demand was exceptionally robust, they might even consider searching for new mines, constructing new refineries, and things of that sort. But at that point, you're really talking about many years before that additional production capacity would actually come online. And the reverse, of course, is true as well. Overcapacity tends to lead to prolonged down cycles in prices. And these natural swings in prices, they can make life very difficult for the unprepared, but clever players are going to see tons of opportunity. So if you're a miner focused on copper and the price tanks, you've got lots of different options. You could always, of course, change to a different occupation, take up, bounty hunting or something completely different. You might cut back on what you're willing to pay combat escorts or eliminate them entirely on the presumption that since the ore you'd be carrying is fetching less, pirates would likely be less attracted and you're less drawn to you. Or you might try to focus on increasing your efficiency by turning your attention to higher quality mines so that you could basically attain more value, realize more value with fewer trips, which basically means less fuel, less time, less crew costs if you actually have that, et cetera, et cetera.
We can pause, actually, if you want.
Another option...
Paused.
Damn, whenever I pause, my thoughts pause, too. But
the thoughts kind of go in a stream with Tony. It's a stream of Tony thought.
Combat escorts. I don't know, Darginator. That's that might be possible. Ex-UE Marine. War's over, or it's not paying enough, so you got to take up another profession. Just like Tony says, if mining's no good, you could switch to bounty hunting. Yeah, I mean, so the systemic world, like Tony says, I thought is really cool because it's all based on logical rules, and, well, we tend to think fairly logically, so we'll be able to, over time, absorb and comprehend at least part of the verse, which adds kind of salt to not gamer salt, but it kind of adds seasoning to not just your skill, but your game sense, I guess. That would make you better.
That was something that always bothered me about the WoW auction house, because each auction house between each server was different, as people on different servers, focused on different things. But I remember starting, you'd start a new character and everyone else is already max level, but you'd be collecting linen. And linen, a bundle of 20 linen, which would sell for 50 copper if you sold it at an NPC store, would go for 50 gold in the auction house because someone wanted to grab some linen and grind it. Because the auction house was players only. Right? So it's not a systemic...
There was a separation between the NPC world and the player world.
Yeah, it is not a systemic economy. World of Warcraft is a fixed economy generated by the players, whereas Star Citizen is, at least by what Tony's talking about, is intended to be a systemic economy where the economy is a living, breathing system. The entire game forms it, and it ebbs and flows and breathes in and breathes out. And I don't know where I'm going with this.
Nah, me neither. I actually had pretty good experiences in my very brief time with WoW. Mainly because I started playing WoW, I think it was around Cataclysm. And I was like, all right, most of the player base has probably moved on, and
Yeah.
they're probably all really good at like gathering and mining and, you know, bots galore and all those impacts that already happened on the market. And so I just assumed when I started playing, like, any crafting I do is probably completely useless. But that actually wasn't the case. I was able to, you know, steadily produce things from like level 1 and
Yep.
sell them on the market and actually make money.
Yeah.
It was cool. Like, it's cool that I was able to participate.
Good.
Yeah, we can start again. I'm at 844.
Same. 3, 2, 1. Action.
One of my favorites would actually be speculation. You could always continue to extract whatever material you're focused upon, but rather than actually selling it into the open market, you might just go and rent additional cargo storage space and store it.
Yes.
There's a cost and there's a risk to that, though, in that that storage space doesn't come
employed by
free.
a large
so you're basically
organization.
making an investment on the
speculate
presumption that
handsomely.
prices are going to bounce back within some sort of reasonable period of time.
Taken out
But
back
in the end,
when
these are
your
all
predictions
just
are consistently
alternative
wrong.
ways by which different players
by
will choose to
predicting
deal with
Operation Fit
the
Pitchfork.
inevitable
Lots of ships are gonna
modulation
die.
of
We're
prices
gonna
that
need a
you
lot of
get
metal.
with economies that tend to behave fairly realistically. Now,
It
on
does scare
occasion,
me
I'll
that
make reference
economists
to
will
a
actually
variety of
be
different types of
kind of a
NPCs for
viable
specific
thing in
types
Star
in
Citizen.
particular, and so I thought that it might make a little bit of sense for
Isn't
now
that
and in the
isn't it-
future
isn't it
to
a thing-
basically
is it a thing in Eve?
give you guys a little bit of
Probably.
background on what I'm talking about when I refer to these. Simulated NPCs are really at the heart of the background economy. They're extremely simple entities that are endowed with just very basic personality traits that help to dictate their behavior. They're never going to be directly seen, and their purpose is to allow the economy to intelligently flow and react to the different imbalances that it's going to see. They'll directly fuel things like factory labor and help to determine what missions are available, where, and for what price. They'll also dictate the actual number of NPCs that you'll see at a given landing zone and their occupations. Their actions are also going to provide inputs to the so-called probability volumes that so that what you see in a given area is truly representative of what you should be seeing if you could actually, delve down into this little virtualized world. Probabilistic NPCs are much closer to the actual, game.
Yeah.
They're handled on the back end.
1 second.
And
So he just
basically
covered the
NPC
first type of NPC.
Yeah. So the simulated NPCs are
The confusing thing here is he's calling them all NPCs when really it is just the real NPCs that are actually NPCs, as the term is normally understood.
I think that the top 2 tiers, the real and I don't have all 4 of them in front of me.
The virtual.
The real and the virtual are kind of real are NPCs. Virtual are very close, largely because they can become real.
Well, I mean, from what I understood, they kind of all become real. Like, in a way, the probabilistic ones become real.
Right.
And the simulated ones are kind of used as, I'm guessing, this pool to draw from.
Yeah.
So really, maybe they pass through different filters or a couple steps, but I think they can all become real, in theory.
So do you understand what he's talking about when he's talking these probability volumes?
Probability volumes?
Yeah.
Well, like, I don't know exactly how they work in the Lumberyard engine, but basically they're just like a 3D space within the space of the game, and they would just have different probabilities associated with, I guess you could call them events. So you could have something like, you could just have the orbit in this section of orbit of Hurston or something like that. A player warps in, so they warp into the probability volume, and it's probably doing this ahead of time, but the probability volume, I liken it in my article to just a die roll. That's probably the easiest way to do it. So it might roll a D100, and from 1 to 96, nothing happens. It's just empty space. But then there's these 4 rare events where, all right, on a 97, a pirate, there's a pirate, and he's flying around. And on 98, there's a cargo hauler. And on 99, there's a pirate attacking a cargo hauler. And on 100, there's, a UEE scout ship. And that's just a example I pull out of my ass. And then you can just have those probability volumes everywhere.
Right. And
so they work out the numbers. The probabilities could actually be like very, very small, and there could be lots of probability volumes. And most of the time, maybe there's not too much happening, but on average, for a gameplay experience, something happens every, you want something to happen every X minutes or something like that.
And I guess the idea of when it comes to the simulated NPCs, there's like, you've got an asteroid field, and on any given day, there's, maybe 10 simulated NPCs hanging out in that asteroid field. So when you hit there, the probability volume and the probability of encountering one of those NPCs is low because there's only 10 of them. But in our case where all the ships have blown up and metal is really, really valuable, lots more people are mining, you might have many more simulated NPCs in that asteroid field, in that probability volume. So when you hit the probability volume, there's a higher chance of you encountering NPCs.
Yeah, so I think you touch on it. You pretty much touch on, I guess, kind of the cool part and the systemic part. Everyone take a drink.
Oh, God, I need more alcohol.
Is that, I guess, I kind of understand the simulated NPC. Like, they're the gigantic pool of possible NPCs, and they're kind of the foundation of the verse.
Right.
And yeah, like, we're just making up numbers, but you could look at random popular mining asteroid field, and from the simulated point of view, there could be like 10,000 simulated NPCs there. That doesn't mean when you fly there they'll be instantiated into 10,000 real NPCs, but those what that simulated data is doing is constantly informing the probability volumes, and then those have a chance to become real. So it sounds like the simulated stuff is a back-end economy service that might not even be running on the server process, but it talks to the server.
Okay.
And the server would have the probability volumes, it would have the virtual NPCs, and it would have the real NPCs.
Right.
Probability volumes they wouldn't have like they wouldn't really have much of a performance impact just sitting there. Virtual NPCs probably have a little bit of a bigger impact, but they're not rendered, so they're pretty cheap. And there don't need to be very many of them. And then real NPCs are hella expensive because they need beautiful gene splicing,
flowing locks,
high-res player models, and flowing dreadlocks, and coat flaps.
Lots and lots of cloth physics.
I need those coat flaps.
On
Chris
everything.
Roberts said in an office once. Sorry, I lost the thread. What are we talking about?
I don't know. I've got my head is fixed around cargo pants and how cargo
I'm trying
pants...
to understand Tony Z and socialize.
Yeah.
And watch a chat.
It is a lot.
Honestly, everything's on the main thread right now, and it's I need more cores.
You need
I need OCS.
Basically, yeah.
Personally.
Okay, I'm at 10:51.
Sorry. So going back to the point before we start again.
Sure.
So this simulated economy service could be running in the back end. And then, like you said, there's 100,000 miners in the big asteroid field right now. But maybe pirates start blowing stuff up. So this is moving tons of variables all at the same time. So there's more pirates. That would have to mean there's more simulated pirates moving in, dropping the number of miners. And then all of that is constantly impressing itself on probability volumes.
And one of the things that they said a long time ago was it'll depend on the simulated NPC, because you'll have some simulated NPCs who decide that the risk is not worth it when there's that many pirates, and they don't go. And you'll have other simulated NPCs that say, screw it, I'm going anyway. And then you might have still other simulated NPCs that say, the risk is too high, so I'm going to mitigate the risk by hiring... where was
like
that?
More security
by hiring,
forces.
Combat prostitutes.
Yeah. Or, and this is maybe skipping ahead a little bit, but that could create more dynamic missions.
Yes.
Of a different flavor. So more miners need protection on the simulated side. So they start asking for them directly from players.
And if players don't take it, they simulate it. But if players do take it, then they instantiate it as a mission with
so that would
NPCs.
become, I'm assuming even the simulated NPCs have like a name and
probably
all that basic stuff. So that would probably become who that person literally is in the real NPC. And then if you kill them, I guess I don't know how birth and death works on the simulated side. He didn't touch that at all. I'm assuming there's I'm assuming there's some kind of replenishment. I don't know if they're going as deep as like actual like population dynamics for birth and death and all that stuff. That was a question I didn't get to ask at the panel. I actually wanted to ask it because I'm like, players are going to be like wholesale slaughtering NPCs. So we start with 10 million and by the end of Operation Pitchfork, there's only going to be like 8 million. More jobs.
More jobs. More jobs. Get the gerbs.
Like jobs. We could start again.
Okay. I'm at 10:51.
Oh my.
I started a bit late. Or I paused a bit late. Sorry.
Come on. All right.
Ready?
Yeah.
3, 2, 1, go.
NPCs that they represent, they're not technically NPCs at all. They really are just probabilities. This functionality has actually been in the game since 3.0, but as of right now, designers still dictate their contents by hand. And as noted above, this is actually going to change when simulated NPCs start to come online. And
patch number...
This entire concept is basically a large optimization that allows us to track key elements at the level of detail needed without impacting anything that any player could actually ever see.
That's not there yet.
Virtual
but
NPCs,
the things to plug into
which
are
I'll sometimes refer to as spoofed, these are actually going to come online next year, and they're particularly interesting for a number of different reasons. I'm going to go into more detail about these a little bit later in the presentation, and so we'll come back to that. The last type of NPC, of course, are real NPCs that you actually see within the game. These are the non-player characters that, for all practical purposes, could just as easily be another player. They're fully simulated, they're quite expensive, and it's for this reason that all of these other types of NPCs actually exist. It would be exorbitantly expensive, computationally expensive, which ultimately to you guys means that you'd see, frame rates take a hit. We'd have, much higher server costs if we were actually trying to do this. If we were actually trying to simulate everything in completely realistic fashion. And again, as I'll get to in a little bit, there are actually some negatives that even if we were going about doing things to that level of detail and really were willing to,
the negatives are all of the simulated NPCs
fully emulate
would eventually be
entity.
stuck
there are actually some
inside
significant
benches.
negatives to that.
as opposed to going about their normal simulated lives.
So another thing that I wanted to touch on is the dynamic mission system. And this is actually one of the more important pieces of gameplay tech that's
Radiant
going to debut
Quest.
next year.
Always forget
but
that
before I get
ship
into
exists.
that, it would make sense to talk a bit about where we currently
Bounty
stand
hunting
and some of the
ship.
limitations that we currently
Oh,
face.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
that like
right
the
now, all of the
bounty
mission
hunting
content
ship?
that we have within the game is completely static. There's no way for the designers to control how many of a given mission is available at a given location or the price or anything of that sort. There's also no way for them to automatically customize those missions based upon the current state of the economy. Now, the designers have, valiantly attempted to circumvent some of these limitations as best they could, but the reality is that they've just been missing a critical piece of the puzzle. And so the dynamic mission system is intended to change all of that, to provide a direct link to the economy so that things can be algorithmically customized as appropriate without requiring any sort of special effort on the part of the designer. And before I get too far into this system, though, I want to define one more term that's going to occasionally pop up and that you have probably heard quite a few times just in various chats on the website. Environmental mission scenarios are created via subsumption, very much like normal missions. One key difference, though, is that they often don't have explicit objectives that you're intended to accomplish. They're used to basically create the world that should just be going on around you, but which we don't actually construct unless you're there to actually see it. These scenarios are instantiated via probability volumes, which are basically regions of space that define the likelihood of encountering different things. And it's within these volumes that the probabilistic NPCs I mentioned earlier exist, if you really want to call it that. So, as a player makes their way through a probability volume, it queries a library of mission content to determine what the player should see, and then it actually creates it. And so for the quantum mechanically inclined amongst you, this is basically like you're flying around the universe, collapsing the wave function wherever you go. That's where the probabilities basically, coalesce into reality, and you can actually see it. That's where we take things, out of, the land of probabilities, which we do because it's so much more efficient, like I was saying earlier. And at that point, we actually create real NPCs on a real server, which you can interact with. So a volume might indicate that there's a certain chance of encountering a cargo freighter and a slightly smaller chance of encountering a pirate. So as you fly around that area, then you'll occasionally see a cargo freighter and a bit less frequently a pirate. And I mentioned earlier that there were some significant negatives, even if we were to try to simulate everything at a complete level. So one of the benefits of this approach that we're doing, besides being a really effective optimization, is that it allows us to highlight what I'd call the interesting moments. If you think about how large space is and how infrequently you actually run into things, the odds that you'd ever run into a cargo freighter right as a pirate was closing on them, or just as the pirate had disabled them and had docked to their ship and was just about to begin a breaching operation, the odds of you coming upon that at that particular moment would be infinitesimally small. But it's actually those moments that are sometimes, the most interesting from a gameplay perspective. And so what we get with this system, besides all the optimization, is really just a natural predisposition towards a higher than normal, frequency of that type of thing happening. So getting back on track a little bit.
Yeah, I want
to. The dynamic mission.
Okay.
Yeah.
So first off, I want to say, during that, I think we had maybe 5. We've only made it 16 minutes into this presentation, and we're an hour into our cast.
Yeah, that's a problem.
Yeah, it is a problem. In that 5 minutes that we were playing Tony, there were 13 things that I wanted to talk about, but I was like, no, okay, let's let them go. And let's
let them stack up.
And now I forget them all.
Well, dynamic missions.
Yes.
Well, he said a lot of things there. I think, there's this economic simulation happening that we don't see. We never see it.
Yeah.
It's completely invisible to us.
We will see it in the stores.
We'll see it in
at the end.
prices
Yeah.
and like things like that, but you're never gonna see simulated NPCs. You could see their instantiation if they become one of the other ones, if they become a real one,
Yeah.
but you don't see simulated ones. So I mean, he's basically talking about, it's just not worth making everything a real NPC.
Yeah.
Like I joke about, I'm only half joking about them all getting caught in benches. Like AI would have to work so good if they were all real NPCs for everything to like work out.
It's beyond the computational capabilities.
Oh, it's absurd. It would probably re-crush the client.
Yeah.
Even with OCS, and then it would definitely crush the servers, or the kinds of servers that do exist that could do it are like, I don't know, they're at Los Alamos, like,
yeah,
they're not worth it. It's just not worth it. So the thing we do is really the thing all games do, is we create this illusion.
It's an illusion.
It's an illusion of like drama and action. So the other thing that Bricerana rightly describes as space, it's huge, is it's really boring. So like,
Man,
there's a
going
one
to
in
space for like 60 years, and we still have yet to crash into any aliens.
No, not
Space
that you know of.
That we know of. Space is boring.
What if neutrinos are alien? Then aliens are passing through your body at every second.
Could be worse. So basically everything that he's talking about here is not in yet, and he doesn't really give much of an idea of when it might be coming, except that he said sometime next year for lots of the economy stuff. Now, the dynamic mission system is sort of meshed with that simulated economy.
Yeah, because I mean, the thing to remember as the player is the simulated economy. At least, like most of the under the hood, it's all under the hood. You don't see it. The very savvy player could probably intuit what's going on if they know the prices of where they're operating, but like, really, there's just random missions, and you hope they're tied correctly to the economy, right? But at the end of the day, there's going to be random space missions, and hopefully the economy service works well enough that players will understand what's going on with the economy well enough that the very savvy player can optimize their play beyond just skill at flying. They could say like, oh, like now is the time to bounty hunt.
Yeah.
Because there's a need for them.
Now's the time to bounty hunt because Operation Pitchfork destroyed all the ships, which means all the respectable people are out mining, which means all the pirates are out preying on the miners. So I'm going to start bounty hunting.
And you hope I hope it goes beyond just look for some missions and pick the one with the high UEC payout, right?
Right. Well,
like ideally, based on what Tony's talking about, players should be able to like make their own highly profitable missions.
Yes. Well, if I've got a Hull E and I want safe transportation, I'm going to have to hire a bunch of players. Right?
Yeah. Or NPCs.
So, or NPCs, but I mean, I think what it'll be is I'll put up a mission, and if no players take it in 5 minutes, the game will assign it to NPCs. I will hopefully never know the difference, which, as I think it was Dargenator that was saying, I'll be able to tell because none of them are making really stupid faces and FOIP at me. But,
yeah.
I mean, this is It's kind of disappointing that Tony decided to do a broad overview of everything, because this is something that we've been waiting to hear more about for years. And I kind of wish we got a like in-depth hour-long deep dive into each of these different topics, like into the AI, into the mission system, into the economy.
That's what CitizenCon next year.
Tony Z-Econ. Yeah.
What is it? 29.49. It's going to be
Just Tony.
You know, get your seat at Tony Hall.
Yeah.
And every hour is just a deep dive into each of the like 10-minute segments here. And then through the bars of his cage, we like pass some juice boxes and pre-made sandwiches.
Jumbify, I will agree with you that it is impossible to make the difference between a human and an NPC not noticeable. The only way that I think CIG will actually be kind of okay with this and get a little bit of a pass is most of the time you're going to be in space. And I think the difference between an NPC ship and a player ship, they're going to be able to get a lot closer than like a PC, because players move around and they jerk around all the time in like when they're player characters, but ships are constrained by the movement speeds of the ship. So I think it'll be easier for them to feign ships, I think.
Nah, I think it'll be obvious.
Yeah?
Which is which. If only by the names, it'll probably be really obvious.
I mean,
but
yeah,
actions, I don't know. They're not going to get human like.
I mean, I kind of hope that they find a way to enforce somewhat realistic names. Like you won't have XXX underscore blunt smoker XX69101 LOL.
Hey, don't say my RSA name on the stream.
Shit, sorry. Hey, we're Canadian. It's legal now.
That's true.
Okay.
All right.
Shall we?
We learned everything. Right, let's go back to dynamic missions.
Yeah.
All right. So far we've learned there's gonna be dynamic missions.
Yes. They'll be created by the economy. And really, if the economy is detailed enough, the economy should be able to create every type of mission, because everything is based on the economy, because we're all a bunch of capitalist bastards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Basically, Star Citizen is capitalism simulator light. So Eve is pure. Star Citizen is light.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know the difference because I don't play Eve.
Neither do I. I just like making fun of it.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm at 1646.
I'm at 45, so we're close enough.
Good enough.
3, 2, 1.
Mission service serves as an intermediary between the game servers and the universe economy service, periodically querying the simulated universe and then using that information to modify all sorts of things that the players will directly see and experience. And this means that missions will start being offered only at locations where they're actually needed, where there's a legitimate function that the economy has determined needs to be performed, and that the prices offered will be justified by what's currently happening within the world. So the dynamic mission system is also going to allow for a lot more intelligent customization of missions, which in turn is going to equate to a lot more variety. And this will be the case for the missions that you explicitly accept. It'll also carry over to environmental mission scenarios. So right now, when a probability volume instantiates one of these environmental mission scenarios, the content is totally fixed. There's no way to customize anything based upon the current situation at that particular moment. With this system, though,
Things
we'll be able
are
to start
boring
doing
right
things
now,
like
but they
dictating
won't be
the type and
forever.
quantity of cargo, whether a cargo freighter should have escorts, a ship's current level of damage, and all sorts of other things based upon what makes sense
I
in that
mean,
area.
they're going to be able to pull things
And
together that no amount of manpower.
This is
could
probably
do
kind of an esoteric
statically.
concept, but to
Yes,
give you a
basically.
better understanding of why this is a really powerful
Humans
concept,
are
I'll go
limited
into
by
a quick and very simple
and-
example. So imagine that there is an asteroid field with a lot of very
Sleep.
valuable resources and a distant refinery, and thus there's a lot of back and forth activity. There's basically mining ships that are heading, from the refinery out to the asteroid field, extracting value, and then heading back with the full cargo hold. So between those two locations, there are also a lot of pirates. So there are a lot of things that you can or that you should be able to infer about this scenario, all of which the dynamic
be
mission
pretty
system is
doable,
going to
Darsh,
help automatically
'cause,
resolve.
I
So
mean,
if you
there's
were to
gonna be,
fly
like,
between the
apps
asteroid
and
field and the
websites,
refinery,
tracking.
you'd of course expect
There's
to
already
occasionally
tracking
encounter a
economy.
miner, sometimes
both
encounter a
in-game
pirate,
and on your
and
second
sometimes
monitor
both.
or third monitor.
However, if you ran into a miner heading towards the asteroid field, you'd expect that their cargo hold would actually be empty. They were heading there to go stock up. Similarly, if a miner were heading back towards the refinery, you'd expect that their cargo hold would not only be full, but that it would be loaded up with whatever commodities were present within that asteroid field. And pirates obviously would logically focus on those miners that had something of value, such that you'd expect miners on the way to the asteroid field to typically
The thing
be
about
in a
this
completely
entire
undamaged state.
presentation is
When they were
basically
basically
everything
heading
he's
in that
saying
direction, they
is
had nothing of value.
Logical.
And those that were heading back to the
Yeah.
refinery that you encountered would
It
sometimes
all
be much
runs on
worse off,
rules.
which would
Rules you
effectively
can
reflect
understand.
the fact that they may have
As
already
opposed to
tangled with
just,
some pirates and just managed
I'm
to get
rolling
away.
random number
And
generators
so
all over
if
the
you
place.
ran into a scenario where a pirate ship had disabled a freighter, docked with it, and it was getting ready to or already breaching, you'd also expect that the freighter must therefore have cargo, be returning from the field, or else the pirate would have logically tangled with with a completely different ship. So the dynamic mission system is going to allow us to customize a lot of this content automatically, so that the things you see are completely logical in nature without the designers having to do any special work. So one more big one to hit here, which is mission spoofing. That's another major feature that the dynamic mission system is going to expose. I've spoken a good bit about how a lot of stuff doesn't really become real. It doesn't start getting simulated by the game servers where it's really expensive until there's actually a player around to see it. Prior to that, things are kept in a much more efficient state. But there's one big problem with this approach, and that's the fact that some NPCs, even the ones that aren't near a player, have a legitimate need to exist in something more than just probabilistic form at significant distances from players. And that's because of the service beacon. So the dynamic mission system is going to query the probability volumes to determine the frequency and specifics of service beacon requests. This would equate to NPCs that are asking you for a service. In other words, you may be getting a call from a guy that's far away, and we don't want to, once again, go to all the effort of creating him until it's really necessary. And so what the system will do is effectively spoof those offers. It will create a little virtual NPC. That NPC will be able to fire commands through the normal communication network, and what you'll see will look and feel just like a request from any other player. It's only at the point that the beacon was actually accepted, when a player agreed to provide the service that the NPC was requesting, that the system would actually transform this spoof, this lightweight NPC,
Pause here for a second.
into a real NPC with
Sure.
which you could actually...
Really quick, because he's talking about, they'll only instantiate the NPC when the player accepts the mission, right?
Yeah.
Now, what if you don't accept the mission, but you find the coordinates and go there, and you're like, well, there's nothing here.
I mean, it
Immersion
sounds like,
broken.
yeah, it sounds like that's probably possible if there are coordinates
I don't know if
before
there
you
are.
accept.
I
I don't know
just-
that there are.
I don't know if there are either. I just thought I'd, throw that in there.
This is the first use of virtual NPCs.
Okay. 3, 2,
Oh.
1, go.
interact. And This might seem like a lot of effort, and it is, but it's really necessary because the reality is that most of the service beacons that are going to get dispatched throughout the system will never be answered by a player. They may effectively be canceled by an NPC that decides to take it. And so what we don't want to have is for every player to have 10 service beacons getting fired off and be creating all of creating all those characters, creating all of those ships, executing all that logic when there's no one around to actually see it. So there's one other thing here that I wanted to talk about, which is the focused NPC generation. And basically this applies to players, well, it applies to two different things. The first thing is actually players with a large price on their head are inevitably going to attract bounty hunters, and they're not all going to be players. These NPCs are handled a bit differently because they have actual purpose. And when they finally run into you, it's not going to be a random encounter, and thus they're not particularly good candidates for the normal random probabilistic distribution within a probability volume. So you can think of them a bit as ghost NPCs that quietly track you around the universe, following any breadcrumbs you're leaving and doing their very best to find you. Once the system has determined that they've succeeded, they'd arrive on the scene, finally get converted into a real NPC and engage you just as a player might. This focused NPC generation also plays a role in the creation of NPC service providers. And this is, to some degree, the mirror image of what I discussed a moment ago, but this time it involves the creation
real
of
simulated
an NPC in response to your requesting a service.
Whereas the simulated NPCs are like, they could be on another server, like a back-end server.
Whether an NPC would respond, and if so, they'd be instantiated and directed towards your location.
The virtual ones
So this is effectively what would happen when you're requesting combat assistance, or you're requesting passenger transport, or you're asking to be refueled or repaired.
It is Ricer.
And no players take the call, so at that point, what the system is going to do is effectively query all of the NPCs that would theoretically exist within that area and determine whether or not any of them would actually be interested, and if so, it's at that moment that they actually become real. So the next thing up is the law and order system. We're going to be making a lot of changes to the law and order system over the next year, but before getting into that, it probably makes sense to give a quick recap of where we currently stand. So at the moment, we currently have the concept of a global criminal reputation, which is a bit like a rolling history.
What about public nudity?
Of your criminal actions. It can't be altered except via time and the actions that you do. We also have a wanted level, and it increases whenever a crime is committed within range of an operational comm array. And it can be removed by hacking a terminal or by getting killed by AI security or a bounty hunter.
There's no parking tickets because the spaceport turrets just immediately incinerate
you
your
immediately
ship.
get paid.
Your $1 million ship.
There are a number of problems with this system, and we'll get into a little bit of detail. So the new law system is going to revolve around the concept of these hierarchical jurisdictions. And a jurisdiction is basically just an area that...
I guess because we just finished the universe segment.
Yeah. I will be right back in 2 seconds. I need another drink for this.
Oh, Jesus.
I'm sorry. I'll be right back. You start on the universe.
Yeah. Yeah, All right, closing thoughts on the universe. It was pretty dense at the end there. But basically, virtual NPCs exist because they're creating the illusion of things in your general vicinity, but you still need to be able to interact with NPCs a light year away or something like that, or 10 light years away, or 3 systems away. So that's not going to work with the simulated stuff. So virtual NPCs get pulled out of, well, it sounds like they get pulled out of the probability volumes. And then they exist, and they can actually do AI things, unlike the back-end services. And then they're made real if certain conditions are met. Darge, it'd be interesting to see the universe play out on its own and see how everything turns out without player interaction. I mean, I'm assuming they're going to do that. But I mean, they're building an economy service, like probably at some other server layer. So, they are going to just be setting that off and watching it go. They need to test what it would do on its own, and then they could probably do, zombie players and make the zombie players do certain things. Like, they could probably run that what if everyone became a pirate experiment, right? And then see how it responds. Yeah. So, yeah, I wonder how fast they could run it. I mean, it is like millions and millions simulations. It's not rendered, but I in my head I kind of think about the economy and versus like simulation part as kind of having a gigantic SimCity simulation, like down at the agent level of each individual NPC, and it's just like whirring away. So yeah, they could probably set it to like really fast mode and just be like, well, let's see if the verse just collapses into civil war on its own. And they probably keep getting communism. And they're like, damn it, something's broken. Add more bourgeois. Yeah, Breeze Arena. That's kind of that's what I guess can be confusing about the NPC talk. They're not none of them are really NPCs except the real ones. And the simulated ones they're just data.
Sorry, I return. I had to make a I had to make a brief detour to say goodnight to Mrs. Erris because she's going to bed. So
that's all good. It was a disaster.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're banned from Twitch.
Oh well, I mean, about time, really.
We can just keep streaming, but
I mean, I'm going to. So
yeah. I think everyone just sees like black screen now.
That's lucky for them, really. Okay, so where are we? Are we good? I'm sorry, I missed that.
Yeah. I was just interacting with the chat.
Okay.
I highly doubt the highest level NPCs will be individually simulated. I mean, from the sounds of things, they are going to simulate like tens of millions of NPCs, which in theory could become part of a probability volume, and then they could become a virtual NPC, and then they could become a real NPC.
I mean, it depends on the number of things that they're going to be simulating for these NPCs, right? I mean,
they said it's got basic traits. Like, there are probably really basic ones, like, who are you? Where are you?
John Smith.
What are you doing?
Miner. What are you doing? Mining. Why do you mine? Provide for children. Done. Simulated. Is he mining? Yes. Where is he mining? Copper. I guess he's hauling copper. If anyone needs him, he's there hauling copper.
Right. And then they've got personalities, so they have like how much danger they'll put up with.
Yeah.
I don't know how their stats are laid out, but stuff like that, like bravery
and that can all be randomly generated and then queried when needed.
Because they're simple, but they do have to have, even on the simulation, like, some behavior.
Right.
Because they have to be complex enough to be like, all right, I'm mining here, but actually it's getting kind of dangerous, so I'm going to go to Terra and become a bus driver.
Yeah. So they'll be able to move and switch jobs and various things based on their skill sets and the levels of risk that they will allow and the amount of money that they require.
Yeah, and I'm sure they're not. The granularity of their simulation can be pretty coarse grained still. They're not like, all right, simulated NPC Jack Jackerson is sitting at a table in his ship and he's reaching for his fork. Like, there's no point in being that complex because you might as well just do all real NPCs, I guess. At that point.
At what level does the economy become too complex?
At what level?
Yeah, at what level does the economy become too complex? When does the complexity you're talking about become unmanageable for the designers?
I don't know.
I don't know that it does at the level that they're talking about it at, because I think at the level they're talking about it at, the economy should just run. Market forces in reality sort of exist regardless of, I mean, they can be pushed, but they stabilize. The market just sort of runs, and it'll crash and it'll, shoot up, but it exists, and the designers will be able to push things in places, right? They'll be able to push freak sandstorms on a planet, shut down all of its mining refineries. So nothing can be refined there, but the simulation will be able to account for that by just moving all of those people that were simulated elsewhere because there won't be work for them. I can understand how people are really, really simple. I'm sure there's probably a real world way to explain this, but the way I see it best is psychohistory from the Foundation novels. Single people are impossible to predict. Masses of people are a lot more predictable. So I think CIG is not really worried about the single individuals. They're worried about the masses of, like, the masses of people, right?
So, I mean, they're creating this economic backend service. Presumably, they could, like I was saying while you were gone, they could run this service and not plug it in, and they can sit there and see how it's running.
I think they were actually
with data coming from it. So, I guess to try to respond to Jumbify's comments, they don't have to account a designer doesn't have to sit there and individually worry about the million simulated NPCs that are going to be there. They just need to design the individual and the range of things an individual can do. So what they are and what they can do. And then you can just spin up 100,000 of them. Then you can see what they do. And if they're completely broken, you go back to the drawing board and you make some changes and you iterate on it. I don't know of an example of a game that has a background economy like this, but I also...
Okay, I'm going to quote from actually something from Relay from a long time ago. From this transcript. The simulation that runs the universe is separate from the game servers. The universe simulation runs millions of AI. It doesn't have to be real time. It's linked to what the players experience by fuzzy logic. If the economy simulation has 10 pirates running amok in a system and 12 players take missions to kill them, it still works fine. The pirates are wiped out in the eyes of the economy simulation and the appropriate responses occur. The above means that if the economy or universe simulation server goes down or has to be taken down for a period of time, it won't instantly impact the game universe that the players see and are playing in. It'll simply stop things like commodity prices from changing for a period of time. The economy has rails. The Economy Universe server runs like a turn-based strategy game, updating the economic state of each star system in turn at regular intervals. It's at the very, very bottom of that panel there. Keep in mind, that's from back in 2015.
Ooh, 3 years ago.
It's
Three and a half.
It's old, but that gives you at least a tiny idea of how they were thinking of doing it then. Problem being, we don't know how much they've changed that.
I mean, that sounds like he's fleshing it out a little bit.
Yeah.
So, like what he was talking about, I mean, that fuzzy logic is the probability volumes.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah. We
Shall
should probably
we
get on with
Yeah,
this.
let's continue.
Law and Order.
2515.
Yeah.
3, 2, 1, action.
Defines its own set of laws, or which adds or extends the laws of its parents. So you might think of the UEE as the federal government. Crusader might be considered a state, and Port Olisar could be considered
God's
a
help
city.
us.
The laws of the UEE would
This was a
certainly be
bad idea.
within, in
Why was
force
I given
within
pause
Port Olisar,
power?
But Port Olisar might go a bit
There's actually a
farther
reason
and prohibit
it's
the
just the
possession
two
of
of
certain
us. I didn't
substances
want
within its
anyone else
jurisdiction.
on.
And
It'd
each
be
of these
worse.
jurisdictions
I
are
think
going
that's
to
wise.
maintain their own criminal database, and it will be accessible to all law enforcement, all AI security and bounty hunters that are registered within that jurisdiction. And here's a list of some of the crimes that we've been debating. Theft would, of course, just be taking something that doesn't belong to you. Manslaughter, killing without malice. A good example of that would be a bounty hunter that's in the process. They're in close proximity to a bounty
Can't wait
that they're
to get
actually
false
after, and
manslaughter
they inadvertently
charges.
kill
When
kill
he was
someone
explaining
else.
this, I was like,
in
yeah,
that
I'm
case,
gonna
you can kind of
manslaughter
infer
people.
that they probably didn't do it intentionally, and thus the penalty should be a lot less than something intentional like murder. But it might involve something like temporary ejection from the Bounty Hunters Guild, et cetera. And this is intended to discourage bounty hunters from getting too careless when they've basically been authorized to go after people.
I'm
within
wondering
these
if
secure
there's
zones.
what ways
Next
there
up
will
would be illegal
to,
mining, and that would really just equate to extracting
frenzy them,
resources from
Elder
a parcel
Scrolls
of a
style,
planetary
and
body
then it
or
becomes
moon,
self-defense when
that
you kill
don't
them.
own, that it belongs to another player, or perhaps it belongs
How are
to the
they gonna
government
tell?
and it's not been opened up for public
Well, we can pause
mining.
briefly.
Okay.
Illicit
Briefly.
cargo.
Yep. Brief pause.
I mean, okay, I had this question for him, but I understood it as comma rays generate an enormous radius of monitored zone, and they're basically omniscient. That's what I understood.
So one thing that I think will be interesting is one of the things CIG has talked about a lot for a long time is data isn't transmitted instantly.
Yeah.
So there may be an omniscient comma ray, and if you commit a crime around that omniscient crime comma ray, it'll log your crime. But for that crime to be registered with the rest of the UEE, that comma ray is going to have to send the data out. And to do that, it's going to have to use data carriers like, say, a herald. Now, if you were an, not quite so upstanding young gentleman and you chose to intercept that herald and destroy the data that it was carrying, maybe the record of your crime would never reach the UEE.
Yeah. He didn't really say if that was possible.
He didn't, but they have talked about it, and they have talked a lot about the value of data. I mean, there's a number of ships that straight up
They just carry data around.
carry data or steal data or so I think that's what they're going to do. They have also said that data transmissions won't go through jump points. You have to
so
send,
ships have to.
You have to send a ship or a drone through the jump point before you can transfer data. So,
Cause radiation.
yeah, except for video chat and voice chat, because they're not going to add a delay to that, because that just wouldn't be fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So actually, that leaves me wondering, like, does some of your pirate crew like camp a comm array, and the rest of the crew like murders people and goes on a killing spree, and then you stop that data from ever reaching anything
if
that matters?
you want to perform like a real heist, probably, yeah. You probably have a team to stop the data transmission. You probably have a team to get into the comm array and wipe any record of it, and then you have the team doing the actual dirty work, which would make it very interesting for like heist style gameplay at some point.
Yeah, I don't know. That wasn't covered, unfortunately.
It was not. This is theory crafting, because it's what we do.
And all I got from this presentation was within comm array, like within monitored zones, it sounded like it's basically omniscient. Like the game logic will just make the call on the crimes you're committing.
You shot first, you are bad.
Yeah. So within a monitored zone, it sounded to me anyway like it's not going to be like Fallout New Vegas or Morrowind, where you can take someone into a back alley or deep into a canyon on a barren moon and shoot them in the back of the head. That will be a crime within a monitored zone.
Yeah. All of this is pure theory crafting. We don't know how it's going to work in the end. So we
are interpreting.
Yes, we're just
based
trying
on
to
the available information.
Interpret and forecast.
Speculate.
Yeah. Okay. Shall we continue? 3,
yeah.
2, 1. Action.
So that would involve transportation or possession of a material that's deemed illegal, maybe an addictive drug or a volatile compound that requires a special license to transport. Smuggling would involve the transportation of intentionally hidden goods that are either stolen or illicit. Murder would, of course, be one of the more obvious ones. It just involves, the outright killing, of a player within a secure zone for no justified reason. False ID would basically equate to you using a kit that allows you to throw off a false signature, so that when you're actually scanned by others, you can basically, give them a sense that you might be law-abiding. Quantum interdiction and dampening, those would relate to the illegal creation of a field intended to inhibit quantum travel, which of course is a tactic that's going to be very popular with pirates looking to snare their prey. And each of the laws within these jurisdictions will be able to be associated with a penalty, and this can be anything from as minor as a fine that might elevate to a bounty if you don't pay it on
illegal
time.
To be a pirate.
It could result in bounties, and there are two different bounties. There's
false
the
ID,
dead or alive variety,
murder,
and then there's
manslaughter,
capture.
theft,
Capture would typically
interdiction.
apply to
Just
some
as
of the
soon
less
as you're
serious
joining the
crimes,
pirate life, you
weren't actually causing bodily injury to someone. Prison duration, how much time you're actually going to serve
pirates
as a
were
result
pretty
of this.
fucked.
Banishment, you could be restricted from going into a particular city or zone for some period of time.
Then and now.
Now, the law system relies upon security forces being able to ascertain whether an individual has a criminal record, and this will be handled by various forms of scanning. So the quickest and simplest type of scan is for ships, and it's somewhat akin to basically running a license plate.
I like this FPS variant.
The next up would be the FPS variant, and this requires you to be in close proximity to another character and to have a view of the character's face.
Completely encompassing
security
helmet.
Forces can, of course, do more than just try and identify known criminal. They can also try to detect crimes that are
special software.
To that end, ships will be able to be scanned for more
heads
than
up
just
display
a license
capabilities.
plate. A deeper, more time-consuming scan, one that requires a bit more player skill, can return the quantity and type of cargo on board. And this will also be of value to pirates who want to basically know whether or not a freighter has anything that's interesting before they actually move in to engage.
And we know that they're
Upon
gonna be
verification of the
adding
presence
more
of
and more
illicit
to
cargo,
scanning,
a bounty would be
scan
automatically
ships,
issued if it didn't
cargo,
already
people
exist,
and everything,
and
so-
the security officer would then be
Making
cleared to
more
engage
of
as
a little
appropriate.
mini game out of it.
And then there would be a
I mean, is it just going to be like
more time
scan
consuming,
over and
more,
over and over and
more
over,
skill requiring,
or is there going to
scan that
be
would
like
allow
the
you
mini
to,
game is getting
effectively
added to the
detect
alpha?
smuggled cargo?
Because right now
there'll be
it's just
few
like
NPCs and
Yeah.
probably few
Scan.
players that are
I
actually
think there will
going to
be some
master that,
more
and thus in
granularity to it
general,
of, like,
smuggling will typically be a
passive scan
relatively
for
safe,
basic stuff, and
a
then
relatively
a
safe
more
occupation,
in-depth,
except in
focused
the
one
most
for
secure
specifics.
zones.
Might need special equipment.
All of these scans are, of course, detectable by the target, with more skillful scanners less likely to be noticed. As with the current system, security forces are spawned via environmental mission scenarios, and thus encounters with them are purely by chance based upon the density of security in that area. And these forces aren't immediately hostile. It's similar to just running into a cop while you're driving on the streets. So unless you actually get scanned, they don't really know your identity. Once they verify, once security has verified that you're a known criminal, then everything changes.
What is the science
you get a pursuit rating, and all of a sudden, security is not summoned to that area merely, incidentally as a result of the probability volume. Now it actually directs additional security traffic towards you. And so the way to basically,
Pursuit,
get
otherwise
them off
known
your tail
as,
is to
GTA
evade them
wanted
for a
levels,
significant period of
basically.
time,
Pretty
at
much,
which
yeah.
point your pursuit rating will gradually go down, and the density of of directed NPCs will basically gradually dissipate. The last thing I wanted to go into on the law and order system is prisons, and they're going to effectively serve as additional deterrent to committing crimes within
We're
lawful
gonna have to
areas.
pause
And I can't
in a
go into
second
too much
here.
detail here, since we're still
second.
working out the details of exactly what type of gameplay you'd experience while confined. And I'm sure we'll start out fairly modestly and then gradually ramp up the ambition. We definitely want to have some interesting
with
characters and missions within the prisons, which can in turn open up some interesting doors on the outside.
when he was talking about when he was
manual
getting
labor to
into
reduce
what
your prison
prisons
sentence,
could be,
penance
though,
for
I
being
was like,
bad, is also pretty high
this
on our
seems
list.
like it'll get cut. even
Players
by
with a
CIG.
bounty on their head that are captured or killed would be
I like
immediately
that they're
transported to
starting
prison,
modestly,
and the
'cause I
duration
don't
of their
know if
sentence
it's
would
gonna
depend
work
upon
out.
the number and severity of offenses.
We'll see.
We're also going to wind up introducing some anti-theft devices, because right now it's far too easy to basically steal these,
wanna pause here for
enormously
a second?
expensive,
Yeah,
ships
sure.
that represent
Okay.
Prison.
Okay. First thing, when it comes to the economy simulation that we were talking about earlier, I do want to clarify that they do actually have a test version of the entire economy simulation up and running in testing. Basically, it runs without players. The economy that they're talking about runs without any player influence.
I suspected this was the case
Yeah.
because anything else would be insane. But where is that info from?
Nakara.
Oh, okay.
So there is this problem at Relay where we've been listening so intently for so long that, and I was pretty sure it was the case. I was checking with Nakara just to double check. I know that they do have it running. I know they said that at some point in the past 6 years. I cannot point you to when that was,
Yeah, I was just.
but it
figured.
happened.
It's good to know where the info's from.
Yeah, it's from Relay. Let's just go with that. Prisons. The idea that you can commit a crime, and this is something that they did talk about a while ago, because they want bounty hunters to catch someone and have someone in their prison cell in their ship, because otherwise it's crappy. You capture a player and they immediately disappear. What is the fun in that? And they want to
My
have
immersion, it's broken.
it is.
What's the point of my jail cell in my ship?
But they also don't want a bounty hunter to be able to capture you and then never turn you in and basically keep you hostage, and you can never play your character again. So,
Which is possible in quite a few multiplayer survival games out there.
yeah.
And it's not. It can be hilarious, but it's not fun.
It can be funny
On the whole, it's
for a
awful.
little bit.
Like, it's awful when the griefers get you.
Yeah. So I really like the idea of them having a prison portion of the game where you commit a crime and you get captured and then you sort of morph over and you're in prison. You have a prison sentence to serve.
Yeah, and like this is modestly simulated in some other games. Not to the extent they hint at, but like this is the problem that Tony brings up. Once you're kicked into a prison cell for 10 murder charges, like it's not like what it's not fun. Then they want the game to be fun. So how do you make it fun when prison is kind of the antithesis of fun?
I think there are two ways to make prison fun. One is a sentence length determined by the crime that you committed.
Of course.
That is not unreasonable. Putting someone in prison for 10 minutes for committing murder, 10 minutes is not that bad.
No.
An hour is not that bad, especially if you can log out and then log back in an hour later and you're out of prison.
Yeah, if it's just running in constant time, then I mean, you could just call it a night.
Yeah.
Once you're in prison.
The other way of making it fun, and I know that you and I were discussing this a little bit, is Chronicles of Riddicking it.
Yeah, which admittedly is like a heavily scripted game. So it would end up a little different, but that's pretty much what Tony alludes to. Is it in the Q&A that he goes into it a little bit?
I think it might be, yeah.
So that's in a while, but yeah, he's pretty much like, no, like there's gangs in the real verse. So those gangs will have imprisoned people in the prisons where you will be deposited. And they could have handcrafted mission givers in a prison. And you could actually spend significant game time in a prison,
just in
a gigantic space sim MMO.
Does
sandbox.
anyone just like sit back and think about that and be like,
I was thinking, I'm gonna get arrested. I'm gonna be in a prison in a space sim. And I'm going to go to the prison showers, and I'm going to drop a bar of soap.
And see what happens?
And I can do that in Star Citizen.
Yeah, that Mad Stelic, that's the point. That is what Tony just said. That's what we get mission givers in space and on planets and based around the economy. This is mission givers based around something that is not the
I'll be right back.
Okay. Like this is mission givers based around something that is not the economy. It's and Jumbify, it might not be fun. But I think that it depends on how they do it. Chronicles of Riddick is actually one of my favorite games that I've ever played. I'm not saying that they're going to have something of that detail, but if CIG have it so that you can either, let's say you've got a 1 hour sentence, you can either play a bunch of prison gameplay that will end up with you out of prison after an hour or two of gameplay, or you can wait the timer. I actually think that's a really good way of dealing with consequences.
We talked about pay to release too, right? So
yeah,
honestly, it sounded like the modest version's probably going to be like the insurance claims.
Yeah.
Where it's like, all right, like you're in jail for this amount of time for free.
Consequence is actually something I've been thinking about a lot lately. I've been thinking a lot about Fallout 76 and how various games deal with consequences. And lots of survival games have absolutely no consequence at all for anyone that goes off the rails and just kills everyone. It's part of the game, go nuts. Fallout 76 is going the other way of it's really hard to PvP someone, And if you choose to kill someone and they don't want to fight you, you can do it. One, it's hard, but two, then you get a wanted level and everyone in the server is told to kill you and you lose caps. Right? Which I don't know if that's fun either. I'm just glad that CIG seemed to be thinking of a different way to take it, of there is a consequence.
Honestly, I like the text mud I played decades ago.
Redemption.
Had basic, like, basic law logic. Like you could go on mindless killing sprees, but you got a wanted flag.
Yeah.
And if you had a wanted flag, all the like guard NPCs would attack you on sight, and you would be, more visible. You would stand out a little bit from the non-wanted, and there would be rewards for bringing you in. So yeah, like it's important to have consequences. Actually, like Jumbify mentions, kind of going back to what I said a while ago. I wonder how many ways there are gonna be to basically fool the legal system in the game, where you could actually normally I want to murder that guy, so I'm gonna do this set of actions that actually gets him to it. Like I'm gonna taunt him, and that gets him to attack me. But he shot first, so now it's self-defense.
Yeah.
So I can kill whoever I want.
And we're gonna have to see what happens when this comes into practice. And Jumbify, you're right. Shaping player behavior with consequence is good, but it does have to be balanced with, you don't want the player stuck not playing the game.
No, and that's why they mention, well, the prison stuff is going to start minimal. Like, it could start as minimal as insurance claims are in the alpha right now.
You
and
have to pay. You pay a little bit to expedite being released, and you have to wait
otherwise sit here for 10 minutes.
Yeah,
and you could log out, but they want to avoid just not being fun at all.
They also, I mean, it's CIG. They want to avoid anything that is a timer-based sit here and wait.
Yeah.
So they want that. I think that's why Tony is talking about, let's have something a little bit more fun in the prison gameplay, where there's actual prison gameplay, so that even if you do get stuck in there because you go on a murderous rampage and wipe out like 30 people and have a 20-hour sentence,
you'll still be able to shiv people for cigarettes.
Yeah. Well, we got to see what CIG, like everything with Star Citizen, we have to see what it actually becomes. There is no timeline for when the initial prison system will come online.
No timeline for prison, but Law and Order V1 is road.
Yeah.
So that's probably taking it from its completely static state now to some of what Tony's talking about.
Yeah.
That's how I understand it. I don't know that it's it looks like the legal hierarchies are going, like, from the very short description on the roadmap.
Yeah.
Designing and implementing the initial iteration of the reputation and law system, allowing for localized crime ratings and reputations, along with integrated location-based missions. So they're iterating in the legal hierarchies, coming up in Alpha 3.5. When Prison will show up,
Prison might even be in 3.5, but it might be as simple as you're here for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay. That was a good talk. Shall we? Oh God,
we really should get going.
Yeah. In 3, I'm at 32:05.
32. Okay.
Okay. Good.
Yeah.
3, 2, 1, action.
A tremendous store
And
of
no,
value.
Jumbify, this stuff is so far
we'll
away.
likely implement things along the lines of a security pad
It is years away.
that would
Absolutely.
either require a significant amount of time or some hacking skill for you to bypass, or a physical key that resides on your body.
But if you
which
want-
basically
you want
means
really
someone
in-depth
can't actually
stuff
start your ship unless they at
in
the very
every
least
part
first take you out
of the
and search your
game.
body.
takes
Yeah,
time.
it's gonna take years.
We're also going to make it substantially more
Most
difficult
games can
for
only
you
do
to,
a small
fly
handful
these
of
stolen
things
ships throughout the system.
really-
and
really in-depth.
By that I mean players will with stolen
Often
ships
just
are
one
going
thing.
to become much less able to frequent a bunch of the shops that provide refueling repair services. So they're therefore going to have to head out to the criminal areas, the lawless areas, in order to take care of a lot of those types of basic operations. And of course, the prices out there are going to be more expensive, and there's also just the added hassle of making the journey. So after talking so much about the law and order system, I think it probably only makes sense to give you guys a little bit of a sense as to where we're headed with bounty hunting. One of the first few things you're going to notice once the dynamic mission system starts to come online will be the directed NPC bounty hunters. And I spoke about this a bit earlier.
Bounty hunting's the same thing as everything
dynamic
else
mission
is these
system
days.
section.
Just check your phone.
But these bounty hunters won't be dependent upon a probability volume to spawn them, and their capabilities and frequency are going to increase as the price on your head grows. Many jurisdictions will have a resident bounty hunting guild, and there are a lot of benefits to registration. There are also going to be some costs. Some will require a certain level of reputation in order for you to join. Some will require a recurring membership fee, and others may require you to maintain a certain quota of bounties. One of the largest benefits to registering is that you'll gain access to a mobiGlas bounty hunting
wonder
application
how many guilds
that can
there'll
show you a
be
wealth of
per
information
system.
about that jurisdiction's criminals,
On
including
average.
their names, crimes, bounties, total
There'll
reward
probably
being
be a
offered,
couple
and
per
most
planet.
importantly, their last known position and ship. And this information is
Per,
updated
like,
in real
planet,
time
planet.
so that once you're registered as a bounty hunter, anything
I
that
do like the
detects the
mention
presence
of a
of a known
mobiGlas
felon
app
within that
for
area will
bounty
be
hunters.
automatically
Makes me think
broadcast
there
to
will
you.
be
And this all
mobiGlas
kind of goes
apps for other
towards,
things as well.
in the direction of
Yeah,
making
which makes a lot
life,
of sense.
more difficult for people that are going out and committing these crimes,
all
and
your
then basically
profession
trying to
information
wander,
in
around through
a
secure
place.
systems.
Yeah.
One of the nicer aspects of the new system is basically that it's going to eliminate the need to manually accept individual bounties. Now you're just going to automatically be registered. You're going to automatically have knowledge of any bounties that are known by that jurisdiction. It's also going to improve navigation. There will be no more clumsy going to the star map and trying to basically pick, whatever zone or region is closest to the last known location of
This is all just
of your
fixes for
target.
stuff that kind of exists now.
One of my favorite features is actually quantum trail tracking, and that's not just a feature for bounty hunters.
The trail tracking is not in
But
yet, is
they're
it?
certainly going to
No.
use it a lot. Whenever a player jumps from one location to another, they're going to leave a trail that, with the right equipment, you'll be able to
But it's
see.
good
And this
that
means that
they're
if your
doing
bounty or whoever you're
Sounds
chasing
pretty
manages
neat.
to jump
Yeah.
away,
I don't
you'll
know
be
why,
able to
but
follow them.
it just reminded
So
me
the
of
quality of the bounty,
Fail
the quality of the tracking equipment,
No,
and the
it
size of the
well,
ship,
that's a good one too, but
is
it
going
reminded me
to
of,
dictate how long this trail can be detected.
Mountain
So you'll need to be
Blade
fairly
Warband.
close on the
Yes.
heels of your
the
prey.
higher your
if you wanna
tracking
have a
skill
chance,
in that
to
game,
actually follow
the
it.
longer the footprints
Another change that
of
will involve
the
what we're calling
armies
virtual,
moving
so
around
again,
on
spoofed
the
NPC bounties.
world map
And
would-
this is similar
would
to the
stick
Ghost
around.
concept
so
that I mentioned
excited for the
before,
next Mountain
except
Blade.
in this particular case, the spoofed NPCs are your targets.
That's
And
like
so you can
number
think of it
2
as
for me.
you're registered
number
as a
1 for
bounty
like
hunter. Of
Star
course, you'll be
Citizen.
tracking the players,
Bangalore.
but we're also going to have a lot of
think it might
NPCs,
be ahead of Star Citizen
again,
for
we
me
don't
right
want
now.
to truly have driving
I don't know if
around,
it'll come
flying,
out
shifting, all of
first
this
anymore.
explosive stuff, unless there's a player to see them. And so
I heard
these-
early
you can think of them
access
as just little
2016,
point-like
eh?
entities
Yeah.
that can move from location to location, occasionally tripping the security
damn.
alarms so that
Hey.
you can actually follow them. And
My 2
they'll
most
generate
anticipated games
everything
are
just as
like
a player would
fusion
in terms of
research.
they go to a
Every
system,
year
then you
they're
may wind up
still 2
seeing them
years
trip
away.
a facial ID camera at a particular area. And if you get there quickly enough, there would actually be a good chance that they'd be in that location. If it turns out that they're not in that area, then you may see a quantum trail that's been left by this little virtual entity. And so effectively
high
it's going
dose.
to allow you to start
Hey, Des.
truly hunting people. Right now, as soon as you kill someone with a bounty on your head, you get paid. This is going to change so that payment is withheld until you've delivered proof of death to the appropriate security office. Capture bounties are going to work similarly, but with one key difference. If an NPC is disabled, they'll simply surrender and follow you, with the idea being that you take them to the designated prison, at which point you'd be paid. It's slightly different for a player because it wouldn't be very fun if another player captured you to basically sit on their ship for who knows how long, and there's no guarantee that they'd take you straight to the prison. So if you actually wind up submitting another player, at that moment they're simply teleported to prison.
Yeah,
you wind up getting a proxy NPC to fill their place. That proxy NPC will behave just like a normal NPC that you captured, and you march them back to go collect your money. Bounty hunters won't, of course, be simply confined to space. There will be FPS bounty hunters, both players and NPCs wandering around the cities. And so every time, if you're actually moving through a city, you've got a price on your head, and people start coming up to you and basically focusing on you a little bit too long. It may be a it may be a sign that they're actually running your ID, and they may be authorized to engage you as soon as they get verification.
City to be like, do any of these guys
also wanted to talk a little bit about salvage. Salvage revolves around the extraction of bits of value from a ship.
There's a point.
And there are three distinct methods of salvage. The first one is component extraction, and that simply involves the removal of components from the ship.
Salvage
this may require bypassing a security
really
system
fun,
to gain access
except for
to the module, or cutting the items from their
old.
fixed housings.
And it sounds
these components
really
will often
profitable.
be small enough to be carried, and thus significant value. Power generators, shield generators, batteries, and things of that sort can be gleaned from these ships with enough trips. Data extraction involves transferring electronic data from the ship to another medium. Some forms of data can only be copied if the original is destroyed.
All right.
So, if anyone has not read Garbage Woman, you should. Salvage is incredibly interesting to me. Now, he's talking about there's three different methods of salvaging. Component extraction is going to be, probably where you get most of your value. You go onto the ship, you pry out the components that are still healthy, and then you'll
probably have to do stuff kind of like what we've seen in like the Lorville walkthrough. You'll have to EVA over and
cut things off.
Bypass. You might have to bypass security, or bring partial power back to the ship.
Yeah. But
various things.
You extract the components. If you remember from the beginning when they were looking at that giant pie chart, just the shields are worth a hell of a lot of money. So if you extract a shield generator from a ship,
and it's in good working order.
If it's in good working order, you're making up a significant portion of the value of that ship.
Yeah, or like a busted up one might still be like a nice piece of loot.
Yeah, so the component extraction is really, really important. So is hull scraping. The idea that you can extract all of the components, all the weapons, and then scrape the hull. You can, theoretically, with salvage, extract almost the full value of a ship from itself.
By his wording, it sounded like hull scraping probably has some kind of limited efficiency. Like, you're not just going to be scraping like perfect manufactured freelancer hull,
but you might be able
to. You might be getting some good alloys. Some of it might be atomized into simpler components. So like, you might not get 1 million UEC of salvage out of a freelancer.
But if you look at just the component cost,
stand to get a lot.
If you stand to get like a quarter or even a half of the value of a ship from salvaging it,
or even a tenth,
whatever, however much. CIG have also said that they want all of the various jobs to be somewhat similar in value. So you have to think that if it takes you an hour to salvage a full freelancer and you get 20% of its value,
And that's like market forces being equal. Right?
I got your
So-
Earthfire. Give me 1 second. I'll paste it. Of course, you can all see this, but I don't care. Because it's just Relay. I'm using Relay's handy search to find Garbage Woman, which I will copy and paste.
It definitely sounds interesting. It sounds like component extraction it's probably the thing everyone can do
Yeah. Well, and that's
as long
the
as they
good
want to
thing
risk it. Like you
is-
could just hop out and grab some loot.
Well, you could do it if you're in a salvage ship like a reclaimer, or you could do it if you're in an Aurora. You hop out and salvage a bunch of parts from a thing you just blew up, and take them back to your Aurora and go sell them. Like salvage sounds fantastic, but
and then data extraction is a much more specialized thing.
Yes,
you might need some special gear on your person. You might need something special on your ship.
But I find it really cool that they've got that as salvage, as like you can go in there with a salvage team. And I mean, the Reclaimer as the top tier salvage ship has room for like 6 or 8 people, I think.
Yeah.
And you'd have a couple running the hull scraping, and then a couple going in and running the component extraction, and then maybe you'd have another guy focused on the data extraction. And the idea that you can extract so much value from a ship. Let's say you find a Connie that's damaged.
That could be like a day's work, like a day, a real day, you know?
And
to do the whole thing, to strip it down to like
whole thing.
Dust.
I mean, there's probably, dozens and dozens of different components on a Connie, but then you've also got to extract the data, and who knows what you could find from the data. It could all be encrypted, and then you have to de-encrypt the data.
You could lose
it
all.
You could lose it, or you could sell it. You could open it all up, and you find out this Connie actually found a new jump point, which is worth more than the value of the Connie pot. Like the possibility. I love this. I love it's like an onion. It's got layers. There's a reason that the Reclaimer is one of my favorite ships in Star Citizen. It was the first ship to really open up the idea that there's more to the game than combat and hauling.
I like that you can choose how much you buy in to something like salvage.
Yes.
So if you don't have the Reclaimer, you can still rip some loot out of the ship.
Yeah.
Maybe you could get some data. I don't know if there's like the more basic unprotected data will probably exist, and you could still strip that. But you can choose like, all right, there's this Connie wreck here. Do I want to sit here for 6 hours or 4 hours or 2 hours and scrape the hull? Nah, I'm not feeling it. I'm just gonna go do something else.
I'm not feeling it. I'm gonna tag its location.
I'm gonna get an information packet for it,
and then I'm gonna tag its location, and I'm gonna sell the location of this Connie as salvage, and someone will buy it from me to go salvage it.
That's like a preview for what's to come.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, sorry. I love the whole salvage is. I think salvage is my second choice for professions. The first being just exploration. So,
yes, I don't really know what's involved in science yet. Transport sounded hella cool. That
cool.
Transport design doc is the best like gameplay design doc.
I really wish they would do some more design docs.
It's like The Sims meets Diner Dash in my goddamn Star Citizen.
Yeah. Okay. 3845.
Okay.
Good?
Yeah.
3, 2, 1, Action.
Enabling only a
20
single
minutes
instance
left,
of that
guys.
data. Some data may require decryption before it's accessible. Some tamper-proof systems may limit how many attempts you can actually make at decrypting it.
Stormy,
et cetera, et cetera.
that was my question
There are
that
many
I
different
wanted
types
to
of data
ask
that, will
at the
be,
panel.
that can be found on a ship, and I'll detail
Can you
a bit
sell
more of those in a
lemons?
few slides from now.
It sounded like you could.
The last and most visual method of salvage
it
is
does
hull
sound
scraping,
kinda like
which
you could sell
essentially
lemons.
entails using a salvage beam to vaporize the outer hull of a ship and collect that material in storage canisters. This is very similar to mining, except the materials extracted can occasionally be in purified form. And so I included a video, it's from a couple years ago, just to kind of illustrate the concept.
This was so pretty at the time.
And
so
basically,
pretty at
this
the
is
time.
just the damage texture, which is very, the same
I
basic
wanted to
tech
ask
that we're going to
Tony
use to extract it. So you can think of it
was
as
the informational value,
salvage,
which must be based
salvage
on a
for the
fraction
hull
of
scraping
the
would
value
be
of whatever
equivalent
you've
to this
tagged or
combined
scanned.
with the mining arm and tractor
Is
beam
that
that you see in
just
mining right
time
now.
degradation
To where you're literally just ripping the
based on the
exterior
packet
hull, and
as
therefore
you own
different
it,
ships will have different
or
materials, and
as
therefore
it's being
different quantities of
depleted
value that you can pull from this in this
is
fashion.
like informational
And
value.
the last
also
thing I
going
wanted to
down.
touch
I
on
think it's
today
both. I think.
is actually discovery. And this is
Stormy,
one of my
yeah,
favorite
you probably could
occupations, and it
damage your
involves
rep by
the acquisition of what I
selling
would call locational information. These packets of information can be procured
listen to
via
Tony.
various methods. They can be actively sought out via scanning. A long-range scan from orbit might indicate that some valuable commodities are present in a given parcel of land, but with a good amount of uncertainty as to the quantity. Information can also be obtained by chance. You might simply be flying around in deep space and come upon a previously undiscovered asteroid field. Perhaps that's what pulled you out of your quantum travel.
On this very
you can also
on this
engage in
very
analysis,
topic, I came up
say,
with
for example, by
an MS
inspecting a
Paint
parcel of
picture
land up close and personal, so that you attain a level of certainty
describing.
you wouldn't be
No
able
one,
to
no one
achieve
saw it
from a
because it was
long-range
at the end
scan.
of the article, and
And
no
so
one.
you can think of
yeah,
discovery in some sense as the grease that allows other occupations to function and or focus. Salvage ships need to know where
I would
there's something
paste
we're
it, but the
salvaging. A lot
URL
of
is
miners will want to
gigantic.
focus on
If
the
we
actual
pause, I can go look
process
at
of
it.
extracting
pause?
value rather than the process,
Oh,
the
sure.
very different skill set that will be.
Okay, we're paused. First off, let's go look at that MS Paint picture. I think it's right. Sorry, everyone.
It's right down at the end.
Here. Master plan.
Yeah, so this is kind of what Stormy brought up and what I was thinking as they described it. Is just like, all right, so you get a gang together. This could all be separate people to protect reputation. But you find some rare information. Yeah, I was styling it after a super mutant. Actually, like that's what I was going for. So I get some rare information, some really good stuff, like I found some diamond asteroids. And then I've got that informational packet that degrades over time. So it's worth a lot right now. And I start taking it somewhere. But over Discord, I tell my mining buddies, yeah, go mine this stuff. And they start mining it. So while they're mining it, what's happening to my information packet? Is it still worth a ton? Is it the same? Is it only degrading over time? It's now a lemon.
We don't really know. Mad Stelic in chat says that I asked him that information's value will degrade by time, and he said possibly by other values, such as if an asteroid flying through the system that's temporary, is it a dynamic spawn, etc. Is it a mining location that's static on a planet? And I think the idea is basically the more recent a scan you have of it, the higher its value. But I think based on the way we understand it, you could scan the asteroid, tell your friends where it is, they show up immediately. They head straight there to mine it. You head straight to somewhere to sell the information.
An info broker, to the shadow broker.
You sell it because it's still brand new info.
You get tons of dough. Your buddies mining are getting tons of dough.
Then someone shows up.
You kill them, obviously.
Yeah.
Then you now you have a new salvage mission.
But then you're a pirate.
That salvage is worth a lot of money though,
It is.
so you get some information packet from them.
And you get
see
the
how that's a
information
master
packet,
plan.
You get the information packet that tells you where the diamonds are, and then you resell that information packet.
And eventually there's this information broker player, and he's like, yo, there's like a black hole forming that's just eating people and money.
Yeah, Mad Stellic, I'd agree. I would imagine that you will get a bad reputation if you give bad information.
I wonder how that's determined. Who determines that?
If someone shows up and the thing that they bought...
Is there like a report button?
Well, no, CIG have talked about ratings. You will be able to rate people
The
you play
information
with.
quality?
I'd imagine you'll be able to rate the information quality. We know that you're going to be able to rate, like, you hire on a wingman to protect your cargo flight, and he does a super job, you can rate him well. Or he does a terrible job, and you can rate him poorly, and then those ratings will show up to new people who want to hire him. So I'd imagine the same thing will happen to information. If you've got a bunch of poor ratings on your information brokerage skills,
I do worry that this might be doxable.
Almost definitely.
That's the obvious flaw in this.
The obvious flaw is you get someone who has, 400 Auroras, because there are people that do. They've got 400 accounts, and they just keep rotating out accounts. And you give the information to a new account, and the new account
I mean, that can maybe be a little... That's like buying from a new buyer on eBay.
Yeah.
You might be like, this person
don't have a reputation
never
yet,
sold information before, whereas this guy's got a 5-star rating, and he's sold, 1,000 information packets.
Yeah.
So, like, yeah, you know what? Like, mirroring the real world is good, and, like, you can get an organic system to that just by mirroring the real world.
The real world does it already, right? Look up a pizza restaurant. Is this guy good? Oh, he's got 4 reviews. 3 of them are 1 star. You know what? I'm going to go somewhere else. Ace Pizzeria.
Oh, that's the other direction of the abuse. You can buy good reviews.
Yeah.
That's what's happening in the real world.
It's true.
And I ordered from a 4.8 on 5, and it was the worst Chinese food
Really?
I've had in the city.
Really?
And I was like, what?
That sucks. We just found actually good pizza near us. Finally, it's taken us a year to find good pizza.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It was hurting me.
I'd like to come over for pizza.
You guys will have to.
Yeah.
We'll do it soon. Okay, let's get back to
really
Tony,
should.
I suppose.
Yeah.
I'm at 4106. God. Yep. 3.
All right, what are you at? Sorry.
4106.
Okay.
3, 2, 1, action.
Be required in terms of finding those materials. There are a lot of different types of locational information, and some of those allow for successive deeper layers of discovery, sometimes increasing the value dramatically, and other times rendering the find completely worthless.
Sometimes I make
a chunk of
pizza,
metal determined
but
to be a wrecked or derelict ship that was found via a long-range scan might have a very small amount of value, but not nearly as much as if you actually took the time and ventured closer and verified the type of the ship and its current state, whether it had already been stripped down, in which case it would have no value, whether it was operational, in which case the value would be worth quite a bit more.
It's some of the best pizza
Similarly, the discovery of a previously unknown asteroid field or comet wouldn't be worth a lot, although
homemade is better.
Verification that they contain valuable
really
resources that are currently in high demand could make their value skyrocket.
Yeah, probably is.
A planetary body or moon has millions
sorry.
of parcels of land, and close inspection of a parcel enough to verify that something of value is present would also result in the creation of a bit of information.
Intra-system wormholes.
And lastly, a stable, intra-system wormhole that allowed
That
a lot
was
of travel
all
time to be
anyone was
saved,
staring at.
would
Yeah.
often find a willing market. And there are other things,
I
geysers,
like
nebula, et cetera,
geysers
that will be of very
of
interest to scientists, tourists,
and
tourist
tourists.
NPCs, things
The
of that
idea
sort.
Yeah.
that
And these
tourism-
packets of information that you collect are stored within
Or
a
just,
dedicated
like, there could be
Mobi-Glass,
lots of just
application and
science-y
allow you to share
things
that
out
information
there
with
in
other
the
players and
systems, and,
organizations.
like, that's part of science
And it's important to
gameplay.
note that the value of information degrades over time. So if you were to find, say, a rich deposit of gold on the surface of a planet, and gold was currently had
There
a
you
very
go.
high
There's a
market
Mobi-Glass
value,
app for
then
discovery.
that very recent information would have a lot of value. If on the other hand you sat on it for a week or 2 weeks, at that point it's not worth very much at all because you don't know whether or not that gold has since been extracted, whether it's actually still there. So you can periodically go back and refresh your knowledge, travel to a location to verify that no one actually found that remote location in the mountains where you'd found that gold, and thus your find is intact. At that point, it's now current information again, and its value would once again reflect that. So information can be sold to info brokers, which is one of the primary ways by which players that engage in discovery will actually make money. They'll buy and sell based upon the current market value, which will be, again, dictated by supply and demand. So if the price of aluminum is in the tank, you wouldn't be able to
Supply
make
and demand.
much
Everything
selling the
comes down to
location of a
supply
ship
and
that had a
demand.
lot of aluminum on its hull.
Yep.
And so information in this sense is very much a commodity, and its value is going to ebb and flow with with other things in the economy. And once an info broker has actually purchased this information, it's going to be freely available for other players and NPCs to bid on like they would with with any other asset. So that's basically it. I'm sorry it went a little bit long.
We sort of made it.
Wow. I thought it went long.
We sort of made it. Now we have the questions.
Well, what we could do is we could basically, so what we have right here is Jake Mealy and Rob Reininger, two of the Austin designers. As I mentioned earlier, Mealy is practically single-handedly responsible for all of the vast changes and the much more efficient, algorithmic content that's being layered onto the pricing models that we're utilizing. And so these guys could answer any questions in any level of detail that you may have in that area. Yeah, that's called payback.
The ultimate parry.
So if we do have a few minutes, we could answer a few questions. If anybody's got anything. Sure.
With the prison, are you looking at online time or offline time? Can I be a bad guy, go to prison?
This is where he's off script.
Yes.
Are you seeing what's your vision of that?
And answering prison stuff.
I would lean towards thinking that it's probably just constant time, but again, the prison itself is still in the relatively early stages. There will be a lot of iteration. Like I said, we'll like we do with a lot of things. We'll start out relatively minimalistically, and then we'll gradually expand out. Some of the bigger questions that we're facing in terms of the prison stuff is how do we make it fun? Exactly what type of gameplay are you engaging there? Because it's a confined space, and we know that we want to have the potential to meet interesting characters. It'd be almost like if you go back, a year and a half ago, to where we had Area 18, and you were confined to that space. And so imagine that space, and you've got you've got gangs in there, and you can actually associate yourself with one of them, and that relationship translates to when you actually get released to the outside. And there would of course be the potential to actually escape from prison. And so there's a lot of potential that would really just be doing the same stuff that we're doing in a lot of other places. I mean, you build up a personal reputation with other characters within the game already. This one is again, it's something that. We don't expect the average player to be getting locked away for long periods of time because we don't expect the average player to be committing lots of crimes in secure zones. And sure.
That's for the NPC technology.
If there's a really good prison system, then all the bad people will be there because they'll be having fun in prison. I can't hear this even on the
So you're talking about whether if you had like a price on your head and you're basically moving into.
If you're selling goods as a bounty merchantman owner, that's if you land on a planet, that would NPCs just start to hear that there's a merchantman.
That's basically exactly. It's like so. What you would wind up having is these probability volumes that I mentioned earlier. They effectively give us a mathematical description of what you would potentially see. And like I said, so we are actually, or we will be, simulating these things, in more precise detail, like these little point entities. But once we get over to the game side, what we don't want to wind up doing is having to compare, for example, the location of an individual ship with, 1 million or 10 million different NPCs and trying to infer stuff there. And so the probability volumes are really a pre-processing step that's performed in real time that takes this background information.
I don't know much about the ship. Is it the one where you can set up shops
so that,
and
for example,
sell
this has been happening for quite a while within the game already.
It's probably just
every
if
time
the
you
price
jump,
is right and you send out
we're
the
basically
info that you're
doing
selling.
is casting your path through the universe and plotting your course through all these probability volumes and figuring out where you would actually run into a particular entity. And this is all dictated right now, like I said, specifically by the designers going in and hand setting this stuff. And so the next step is basically hooking that stuff up to the back end economy so that we can start to feed real-time information to these volumes so that the quantity of pirates, it ebbs and flows based upon what's actually happening. Sure.
You kind of want like half of the panel to be this once you got there, because you're like, oh, he's off script.
You kind of just want the entire CitizenCon to be him.
Yes.
Certain components of military grade is the first question, and thereby being able to update your.
I don't get as excited about all that graphic stuff. It's super pretty, but like, I know that's the stuff that tends to like I lose interest in first, and it's just noise eventually.
It's really pretty, but it's the game that
the opposite of salvage, of course, is repair. And so it's very possible you disable another player, you take out their engines, you take out the crew. Well, now you need to repair the engines before you can go on your way. Or you find a derelict ship and you basically perform enough repairs. You repair its hull, you basically replace its its batteries, you give it a new power module, etc. And now it actually becomes operational again. And one of the reasons I should just point out, one of the reasons why component extraction is so high on the list is because it allows us to let players extract a significant amount of value before we actually have to deal with the more complicated issues. Like, imagine you have an Idris and you've got these big, enormous, batteries, and you want to actually extract that entire thing. Well, that just becomes, a user interface and logistical nightmare. Whereas components, these nice little, small, easily, carryable things, it's a very simple way for us to allow you to go onto a ship, bypass the security systems, cut off these things, and extract maybe not all, but significant chunks of the value in this manner. Data is the same way. So you can have ships that basically have the location stored on them, just like I was mentioning on Discovery. You can have a ship that has within its database that you can extract, that you can salvage.
I was assuming by batteries they meant
of a
giant.
Now you go verify the comet and actually see what its current state is. The hull scraping is just another way to basically pull a good chunk of the value of its hull plating and stuff off. And so the reason why those three are at the top of the list is they're the most straightforward and quickest ones to implement, and we want to get the basics of some of these things running as quickly as possible so that we can start to iterate on them and basically broaden the number of things that players can do within the game.
With the Discovery location data, do those locations exist temporarily as long as the player has the data? Or are these locations that are permanently like new places to explore, discover, people to come back?
I mean, he does.
Yeah, they're actually dynamically created, but as long as you retain knowledge of them, they would basically continue to exist. In other words, I'm flying, from point A to point B, or I'm doing a scan, and I actually locate, a new asteroid field. That asteroid field wasn't necessarily, always there. It was created, randomly. But now that you know about it, and you can think about this logically as being. These things wouldn't be static in the real world, right? These things are moving. So once you find it, well, I know where it's at as long as I keep pretty close, tabs on it. But if I ever just forget about it entirely, you know what? There's asteroids coming and going through the solar system, moving around, all the time. It's like there's no certainty that you're ever really going to be able to find it. Plus, there's always the question mark of, did another NPC, or player find it that you don't know about? basically, mine it into nothingness. And so there are a lot of reasons why this thing may eventually not be there. But as long as you retain knowledge, as long as you go back and periodically refresh it, then you can keep it, in perpetuity.
Tony, Chris mentioned it a little bit in the opening statement.
Hi, Jake.
About survival play.
Hello, Jake.
I know we've talked about this a lot over the years, but what's the current state of thought in that? Say you get shot down and no comm equipment on a moon or a planet,
Well, that actually plays right into that dynamic mission system and and the probability volumes I was mentioning before, to where, in essence, what you'd wind up doing, you get shot down over a moon, and what you do right now is you basically fire up your service beacon and you basically
But is Star Citizen
set it to,
scum?
100 credits, and basically you ask somebody for help.
Is it scum though?
The problem is that if
Can
you're
I
off in
poo
some
on the
distant
moon
moon or
where
whatever
I
that
have
case may be, there may not be a player around you. Or
No,
maybe the
it's
players
not
that are on
scum.
the same server as you are too far away, or maybe they're engaged in their own missions. And so what we want to do, is basically allow NPCs to start to participate. And so if you're on that moon and you need transport, and you basically throw that request for
The survival aspects just honestly reminded me. They just sounded like
Fallout. What the dynamic mission system would then do is query all the
you're
probability
hungry.
volumes and
You
determine
get
whether or not
hungry,
any NPCs
it
would
will
actually
kill
be
you.
interested in helping you. And that would depend
you're-
on,
if
again,
you have
what they're
no
doing. It's
food,
like, maybe
okay,
your price
you
is
might
too low, so
die.
you're not interested in them.
But,
But if you get the
it'll take a
price
while.
to the right point, you will eventually pull
It'll
one
take
of
a
those guys
while.
in there.
You should
And this,
probably-
again, is,
maybe
it's
you
a
should just kill
capability- It's a
yourself.
capability we don't have right now because there's no easy
Don't take that out of context.
or effective way for the designers
That's
to
gonna
tap
get clipped
into
out
it.
of
And that's
context.
why
Yeah.
we've got a lot riding on this thing.
And post it
we're
on
so
Twitter.
anxious to basically get it in as quickly as possible.
Survival mechanic any deeper? Have we thought about that, going into the fact that you don't have any water, food, such and such, so and so?
Yeah.
Such and such
Well,
and
we've
so
got
and so.
thirst and hunger is actually on one of
Yeah.
the things on the list
I'm
that
okay
we've
with
got
thirst
slated
and hunger.
to deal with next year. And this would be the same
as
thing
long as we
for,
don't
for
get,
all the NPCs, to where you'll
I'm
actually
low on
start to
vitamin
get.
C.
You'll need to basically, you'll need to
space
basically
scurvy is the
drink. You'll need
worst.
to eat. You'll need to do all of that, or else you'll very gradually, because we don't want to make it too annoying, start to suffer various deleterious effects.
Deleterious effects. I love his
are-
words.
You are very hungry.
On your backend database, how many variables and arrays are you maintaining just to keep that dynamic?
Minus 20% stamina.
I just
At any
Have
given
you
time, the
ever in
spoof
your
ones
entire
are actually
life
going to be
heard
fairly
someone
minimal
say
because they're not
deleterious?
really created except
I've
as
only ever heard
necessary.
it in
other
university.
words, most of the time.
Yeah.
So the eventual idea is to be simulating 10 or 20 million
Tony
of
Z
these, of these
is a
so-called
smart-ass.
the simulated NPCs, but they're very, very lightweight.
Dude,
don't need to be
he's
updated.
fantastic.
If it's when you're talking about that simulation, you're
That's
not
it.
doing 60 times a second. You're not doing 2 times a second. You're updating.
Will
these
there
guys
be a
every,
Tony Z
once
NPC
every
in
5
game that
minutes
I
or
can
so,
go
because
bow to?
It's not as if these simulated NPCs
yeah, he's,
change their
actually the
occupation
model-
on a second by second
model,
basis or anything
the
like
model
that. And so
for
what you
the
wind up
imperator.
having is a big repository
Okay,
of these
good.
characters that periodically
Alternate-
reevaluate,
alternate
decide, do I want to keep
imperator.
working at this factory, or is there something
think,
more attractive? Well, if I leave the factory and I
Lloyd-
decide to become a miner, what am I actually doing? Oh, well, if he's doing a miner, then all of a sudden there's a demand for more fuel in that area. And if he's not working at the factory, that means all of a sudden that the rates for factory workers, you've got one less NPC that will actually be available to supply that, which means the cost of things that depend upon labor, in general would go up. I mean, one NPC would never really matter.
And it's I
but,
like this.
you get the
It's
point.
one
I
NPC
mentioned
doesn't
also
matter.
earlier that
It's the whole
these simulated
groups of
NPCs
them.
would have a direct impact on the things like the number of NPCs, the occupations that you see within the game. And by this I mean, so if we're simulating, say, 100,000 distinct NPCs, simulated NPCs on the back end, then this may translate into 100,000 divided by 1,000. So you wind up with, that's 100 NPCs that you'd actually see walking around. And there would be all of your normal persistent characters, your bartenders, your shopkeepers that are actually very specific characters that have particular lines of dialogue recorded for them. And then there's all all of the the so-called background characters. There's the window shoppers and the tourists and the blue collar workers and and all of those sorts of guys. The vagrants, the criminal elements, etc. That we can basically create at will to basically fill up the populace. And the other interesting thing is we can kind of bend that however we see fit, so that if, for example, you've got a mining colony, and therefore there's a lot of blue-collar workers, and there's not much in the way of advanced, production capabilities or anything like that. And I mean, they've talked and all of a sudden, the asteroid field that's near that area winds up getting depleted. Then all of a sudden, there's very little ore being brought in and being utilized, etc. And so, what you would logically expect is lower per capita income, less employment.
I wonder how that happens. Like
what
the swapping out NPCs
would therefore be more of the simulated NPCs shifting their occupation from employed blue-collar worker to criminal, to criminal element, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Paint jobs, right? Like you paint on dust. They've got damage levels or like age levels for everything, right? So as
an autonomous ship piloting the ship.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, and I actually cut it because I was trying to not get too crazy on the time, and they're already giving me the sign here. I had a whole section on multi-crew, which we now have.
I hate you.
We've talked about multi-crew
the most
for
rage-inducing
a long time,
part
and we've
of
never
the panel.
gone into precise detail about exactly what
whatever
that meant and how
dumb panel is after
it,
this
how
panel.
You're hire guys, how are you going to dictate
shouldn't
what,
have
what
existed
they did,
because it should have been multi-crew with Tony Z.
We have enough clarity
I
at this
believe
point
after
where we
this
can
panel,
talk
they talked
pretty
about,
precisely about
what we're
that.
gonna
But
cover
that's
tomorrow,
really
which was
that's an
lore
hour-long
makers.
talk in and of itself.
Get out.
Who cares about
And what you mentioned there
is
one of the optimizations, just to end on, is if you have a crew. And you think about, imagine you've got an Idris and it's got 100 characters on it. It's exceedingly inefficient if you've got engineers engineers that you've hired down in the engineering section and there's no other players down there to actually see them. You don't really want them to be pathfinding, animating, doing all of this very computationally expensive stuff. It's incredibly wasteful. And then you think about, well, you can have
so
lots
many
of players
people
with
cut
lots
on
of
benches
ships, with lots of extra crew. And so everywhere,
think of all the
we're always thinking about
collider
ways
events
we
that don't
can,
need to happen. It's really expensive.
Give you the
Hey, it's
illusion that it's
Jake.
doing more
And
than
Vince's
what
ear.
it is,
I saw
where
Vince's
we're
ear.
looking for ways to
And Jake.
optimize so that we're getting all of the beneficial end effects, maybe in some cases even more, like I mentioned earlier, without with all of the rampant waste that would come from just blindly doing some of this stuff. One of the things we've been looking at is basically a couple of different levels of basically tapping down on the NPC functionality so that you would still get all of the behavioral benefits of having an engineer down in the engineering section. He would still repair things at the rate of speed that he normally would. He could still be injured if there was damage done to that part of the ship. But we're able to basically turn off some of those high fidelity animations, pathfinds, stuff like that are really only a benefit for players there, as long as they perform.
I saw you.
As they would if you were watching them, in another way.
It's actually over, so I'm gonna rewind.
Oh yeah, it just finished. Cool.
I'm there. You can see me briefly.
So that was that.
I have a face.
That is a really, really damn good panel. Quite frankly.
That was my favorite panel at CitizenCon.
It talked about... It's the one that was like... This is stuff that isn't in yet. This is what we're doing in the future. Everything else was like, hey, this is almost ready. You're going to see this in a couple months. This one was like, here's where we want to be eventually.
Yeah. This is, well, like Tony's job is, there's the dream of Star Citizen.
Yeah.
Which is more complex than what can be made real. But Tony's job is to say, all right, but like, what is as close as we can get to the dream? That's our goal. End goal.
Yeah.
Now, what are all the stepping stones to get there?
And listening to him do it is just straight up fantastic.
Some of those stepping stones are on the roadmap. So
they are.
This is happening,
Yep.
slow and steady.
Yeah. It's lovely to see, and it's lovely to hear him, and I really hope that CIG get him in front of a camera again soon, because we do not get enough Tony Z.
Well, maybe if we stir up enough.
I've been doing a couple tweets. I'm going to do more tweets tomorrow of petitions for Tony.
Don't be fooled by all the shiny cat toys they show you in the art panels.
Yeah.
I like cloth, but we
Tony.
need more Tony Z.
Yep. Okay. That is going to be it for us tonight. We are going to do, I believe, the Lore Makers panel tomorrow night. There will be nothing Friday. And then Saturday, Commander Llama here is actually back with us on the relay station.
I am?
You are. I mean, I hope you are. Okay, good. Whew. So, yeah. Thank you guys all for hanging out. And we'll see you in the verse.
Thanks for listening to us ramble. Over Tony Z.
Over Tony Z. Yeah, I'm not sure why you did that. Just go listen to him again, probably. Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.